removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
This is Rogers TV. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers Cable or Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest today is Alex Ruff, the MP for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. And I can say that again because this is his third victory as our MP. Congratulations, Alex.
Thanks so much, David. It's humbling to get re-elected again. I should correct you. I'm still, I think, technically the MP-elect. They haven't, Elections Canada hasn't officially at least reported back the final results to Elections Canada that I'm aware of. Might be happening today. It should be happening very shortly, but it's a technicality or semantics. But yeah, it's humbling to be re-elected for the third time.
You are quite right. In preparation for this, I went into the House of Commons website, and there's no seating plan. You are listed as the MP-elect, which is your crew, of course, but no seats have been assigned, nothing to do. It's just blank.
I'm pretty sure I'll be in the same seat I was before, David. I've sort of told the whip's office that if they ever move me, I'll let me just show up virtually. So I want my same seat in where I've been sitting for basically the last 5 years.
And just to be clear, that is very much in the back row. You are a backbencher.
Yeah, I don't put any much validity in any of these front benchers, back benchers, whatever. But yeah, I find it somewhat artificial. I sit there. There's no such thing as a bad seat in the House of Commons. So I prefer to sit where I am because I actually think it's the best seat in the House. I'm dead center. I can see everything. The ex-military in me, there's nobody on my back. And I'm actually can see everything that's going on and pay very close attention. And at the same time, I can get work done when I'm sitting there when I'm not on camera as much because the angle shots that I don't need to be on camera. I don't think people elected me to get my mug shot on television, right? So ultimately, yes, it is in the back row, but it wouldn't matter if I was a cabinet minister, if Mr. Poilievre had formed government. I would demand to sit in the exact same seat on the opposite side in the back row, even if I was a minister. So that would be a condition, or I wouldn't accept the role as a minister if they don't put me in the same seat that I want to sit in the back row, because the other people can fight over it. I don't need to. Every seat's a great seat in the House of Commons. It's a privilege to be
You
represented.
remind me of seating fights we used to get into in high school. Fight for the back row. Fight for the back row. But in all seriousness, just so people have some sense of where you sit, as you said, you're in the back row against the back wall of the House of Commons. To your left would be members of the Conservative Party, of course. But is the NDP not just beyond the end of the Conservative Party?
Yeah, so normally, I mean, in the last couple elections, all the opposition parties, obviously to the immediate left as the speaker is looking out, is the official opposition party, which is obviously the Conservatives for the last 3 elections. We occupy our seats all the way down, and then they break it out, and then the Bloc Québécois is the next largest party in the House. Then it was the NDP, but in fact, because the Liberal minority government in the last 2 elections was, fairly small, around the 156-ish type seats, they could not, and there was more opposition members. They had to actually put some of the opposition members on the right side in the chamber as well, which is unusual, but in reality, there was a number of NDPs in the Green sitting, and even the independent members were sitting on the right side of the speaker on the government side. Normally, there's just a division line. So ultimately, it all depends on every parliament. I know they did some renovations during the dissolution of parliament and during prorogation. Actually, they started it. But they've now had to add some extra seats, obviously, because we're no longer 338 MPs. We're now 343 MPs in the House of Commons.
Well, that's the speaker's challenge, I guess, or the speaker's office challenge, is to find the space and make sure that everybody's got a right chair.
Well, yeah, it's up to the parties to allocate the seats.
Yeah. So the House comes back on the 26th of May, and that is the opening of Parliament with all its pomp, ceremony, and whatever. And then we've got the speech from the throne on the 27th. And what's unique about this particular speech from the throne is that it's going to be read by the King, which is something that has not happened since 1977, I believe.
I believe you're correct.
So now this is the pomp and ceremony. We were talking a little bit about this. There really isn't a lot of space for the members of the House of Commons, because you're barely allowed into the Senate where the speech is read.
Yeah, that's correct. Apparently, there wasn't very much space even when the Senate was located in Center Block, which has been under renovation now for the last 6 years and slated to be, I think, under renovation for at least another 5 to 6 years. So space was limited, but what adds to complexity is that the Senate is currently in, I believe, in the old Bank of Canada building is what it's called. So there's a logistical thing because it's actually, down towards Rideau Canal, down the road, down Wellington. So therefore, you got a logistical challenge to get down there when the reports come in and the whole, as you said, pomp and circumstance of how the speech is read or is notified that the speech is about to be read. So MPs are invited to go down and attend, but I did do that in 2019. The space was very limited. You couldn't see anything for where I was standing. You could barely hear it. So ultimately, I'm assuming the turnout will even be larger with the King coming to deliver the speech. I intend to give up any space that I would be entitled to some of the brand new elected members of Parliament for them to attend and go through it once. I've been through it once, and it's I can watch it from Parliament itself now that we have screens in there. I'm sure they'll be airing it in the chamber or even from my office, because it does take a bit of time for the speech to be read. And then, as I said, to allocate the logistical time to get those people that do attend to have it reported back into the House, and then to carry on with the response, which is fairly short. So the first couple days, it's actually fairly short days. It's very procedural before we get into actual debate around the speech from the throne, which, interesting enough, is a confidence vote when that speech, if it concludes debate. But actually, from a parliamentary perspective, there is no requirement for debate to actually conclude or a vote to actually even occur on the speech from the throne. Past parliaments, some conclude it, some never conclude it. It all depends on priorities and how fast things need to get done, and just how contentious or not the speech from the throne may actually contain with respect to policy ideas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think the ceremony is interesting because the rabble from the House of Commons is kept. You can't go beyond the bar in the Senate in the Senate chambers. The rabble have to be kept out.
It is interesting procedural circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that is happening right now. Okay, the government has Mr. Carney has chosen his cabinet, but on the opposition side, what is happening right now?
Oh, well, so now that Mr. Carney has selected his cabinet, I'm sure Mr. Polyev will go through a similar process. I'm assuming a number of people will stay in the same shadow cabinet positions that they were in before, but we did have people resign, not seek reelection. We even had a few, unfortunately, not get reelected, so that did run. So there will be changes, and obviously, I anticipate, you know, most of the individuals will be actually reelected members of to form the shadow cabinet. However, you know, Mr. Polyev, I'm sure, will select a few new members. In fact, we do have some very experienced new members that, even though I'm saying they're new members, have been elected historically in the past, either at the federal or provincial level. So they may just slide into those roles. But for the brand new MPs, obviously the learning curve is fairly steep. So we'll see. Well, I'm sure we'll see that announcement come out in the later this week.
Mm-hmm. So it's there's a lot of toing and froing and procedural work within the caucus and all that.
Well, that's all up on the leader. There's no real procedural thing. There's
Okay.
procedural things going on. There is no legislation to debate yet. So going through what we call sort of a normal legislative process that we basically mirror that the government follows. So we do a caucus advisory council or committee to discuss any legislation for anybody that's interested. Anybody within the caucus can attend that preliminary discussion led by the respective shadow minister once they're appointed. Then it goes through shadow cabinet, which basically there's the lead shadow minister takes that file on and presents it to a subcommittee of cabinet that basically of shadow cabinet, that if it's, you know, maybe a national security or defense issue, or if it's a social or labor issue, depends on what the issue is. I think there's 4 shadow cabinet subcommittees of shadow cabinet. And then from there, it goes to plans and priority that's chaired by the leader. And then from there, it comes back to national caucus. So that process is basically a replication of what the government follows, and everything that gets voted on in caucus once there's something to actually debate or make a decision on. But with brand new parliament, the government has yet to table anything. But that process, once they get back and gets tabled, will kick off right away with the respective, because there will be legislation get tabled fairly quickly, I'm sure.
Yes, it certainly sounds like there are pieces of legislation that will be coming down very quickly. Mr. Carney seems to have said, we're moving and we're moving fast. So it'll make for an interesting spring for you.
I don't think it'll be quite as interesting as historic like the last ones, because obviously the very first election was brand new, and a switch from majority to minority. The 21 election, though, you know, we were still dealing a bit with the remnants of the pandemic, but in reality, there was like barely any change. It was sort of, as we discussed, I'm sure, back in 21, it was sort of a wasted time election, and ultimately nothing sort of kicked off. So this time it's hard to judge. I mean, it sounds like we're only going to be back for about a month before Parliament will recess for the summer. We'll see. But if that's the take, it'll be, you know, it'll be busy. But at the same time, committees won't really be barely any of the committees will get reformed, I don't think, because it takes time for the committees to reform as well. Some of them will get stood up fairly quickly if there's a piece of legislation like the budget. So I think the Finance Committee will get formed almost immediately, but we'll see how that all plays out.
This may be of interest to you, as just before we went to air, or we just sat down to talk. I did see something that the government is not presenting a budget in the spring session, but will be presenting a financial statement, a spring financial statement, which is kind of, you know, you would think the government would want to present a budget, but That's what.
Yeah, so you're catching me by surprise, David. As you know, I was on
Yeah,
another long call before we started
yeah.
recording this, so I have not read that yet. I'm a little bit surprised that that's the way the approach they're taking, because we did not even have the fall estimates never kind of came. Their final estimates never got
Yeah.
finally approved, or there's been no budget yet. So I do find it interesting on how they intend to put that on the table to actually expend Canadian taxpayer dollars without it actually going to a vote. So they have to present something that will ultimately allow them to have the business of supply, and which of course then also triggers a requirement that there will be, I believe, 4 opposition days before the summer recess. 3 of those will be for us in the Conservative, the official opposition, and 1 will be for the Bloc Québécois that will need to get debated as well before the end of the supply period.
Well, we live in interesting times, as the old expression goes. So we shall see.
It is interesting.
It is. Now, you mentioned committees forming. How does that? What's the process? And we're talking about the various committees of the House. How does that process work?
Well, I think basically all MPs are encouraged to share their preference with the leader and the leadership team, and the whip's office takes a lead role in sort of trying to, divvy it up. I know the Ag Committee is a popular one, but considering our Conservative caucus is mainly comprised of rural MPs, a lot of people want to be on Ag, and you can't put 140, 4 people on the Ag Committee. So ultimately, that's what the leadership team tries to do, is to divvy up people's preferences and balance it out where people's skill sets and background and interests lie. Ultimately, that's how that gets decided.
Sure. Now, you, in the last session of Parliament, you were a member of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, which is a very important committee and took on additional importance in the last Parliament. But I noticed 2 things. First of all, David McGuinty, who is I believe was the Liberal chair, is now the Minister of Defense. So he's in cabinet. Is that committee sort of, it's equal representation from all of the parties, I believe. Do you anticipate going back there, or will you just await to be called?
Well, I hope so. I've indicated that that's my preference, is to go back onto that committee. There was one of the reports that we hadn't finished yet before, unfortunately, Parliament was dissolved. I think as the last time I was on talking to you, because we're not a committee of Parliament or a committee of parliamentarians, we were actually not impacted by prorogation. So we continued to meet throughout the prorogation period, finished our one report on lawful intercept, which the Prime Minister will now have, I believe it's 30 sitting days to table in the House and to Parliament the redacted version of that report once Parliament does reconvene. And then we were still working on our sort of the role of the National Security and Intelligence Advisor that we did not finish, unfortunately, before dissolution. So I'm hoping it would be easier if a lot of us that partook in all the testimony and appearances and a review, that if there's a good nucleus of us going back there, but there will be definitely change. Mr. McGuinty had already been appointed to cabinet, I believe, in December of last year. So the Prime Minister had appointed Patricia Lantanzio as the chair of that committee, who had been on the committee for roughly about the same amount of time. She had got on there just before I did, about 3 years ago now. And so I anticipate she may get appointed again, but that's really the purview of the Prime Minister, as is it's the purview to actually the Prime Minister to appoint any of us based on consultation according to the NSICOP Act from the respective party leaders. The membership is maxed at 11 members. no more than 4 members of the committee, including the chair, can be members of the governing party. So they're out of the 11, only 4 can be Liberal members. That being said, it is comprised of MPs and senators. So our composition sort of at the end, there was a couple because Darren Fisher had been made the Minister of Veterans Affairs too, right near the end. So he was off the committee. So we were short a couple, but sort of our composition when we did the foreign interference report was 4 Liberals, 2 Conservatives, 2 Bloc, 1 Bloc, 1 NDP, and then 3 senators. So I anticipate it'll be somewhat similar. It'll be fascinating to see if the NDP actually get a spot because 1, they're no longer an official party. And number 2, even I don't know if the rules, so it's something I'm not familiar with. I don't think there's anything preventing the Prime Minister from actually appointing an NDP member to the chair or to the committee. But the NDP committee member was Don Davies, who's now the interim leader of the NDP, so he can't really go sit on it. And at only 7 members, they'd be hard pressed to fill that role, considering, although maybe they will, because my understanding, they will not have representation on any committee. So maybe that is the one committee that they can fill. But that, again, that's really up to Prime Minister Carney. Because that's the way the act is written. It is appointments based on ultimately the Prime Minister's decision.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that foreign interference piece took on a whole new life in the election campaign, to be sure, because there were, although it didn't come through that committee, there were announcements about certain influences that were happening. So
yes, so the site task force, which is comprised of sort of senior bureaucrats and experts, did report a bit more publicly than they have in the past. That was actually a point that we had brought up in our NSICOP report on foreign interference about the important role that site does play, and that maybe that they need to, consider what the threshold is for what goes public and how soon it goes public. So there was more information released this election in the early days about potential perceived interference, in particular from China again, that was in the media at the state of this election. So it's our report, I do believe, again, we did get Bill C-70 passed as a result of that report. The government did table C-70 that passed unanimously, which one of the fundamental issues, as we've talked about before, allowed CSIS to share information with other levels of government and other organizations beyond just the federal government. So that was a key thing that I think has helped and will continue to help address foreign interference in Canada.
I think that if there's a difference that in this election that your work brought, it was probably that we were more aware as citizens, as electors. We were just more aware of that potential. I mean, I'll be honest, 90%, 95% of the population has been going along blithely thinking, oh, we're great. Nobody's interested in us. Not true. There are certain people that are interested in this country and will have, as we are discovering, want to have an influence in our electoral systems and in our government. So, your work was important, and I think it this time around, I found it very helpful to know that stuff was going on.
No, I agree. It's public awareness is one of the key mandates. Obviously, our committee's role is to share, provide a little bit of a review and to some extent oversight of the national security and intelligence agencies across Canada at the federal level, provide that feedback to the government and to Parliament, and more importantly, I would argue in some ways publicly, to make sure that issues aren't just being put to the wayside and that we can have a well thought out review done that does allow better education and more awareness of some of these critical issues around national security.
Absolutely. and I think I dare say it's a little more important than balloons flying over Lake Huron. Um, that was a while it was interesting and somewhat funny, the this is far more serious, far more serious.
Yeah, well, it's about bigger issues. And it's, again, making sure that our national security and intelligence organizations are not only resourced properly and functioning properly, but they're actually following, our job's not to make sure they're following the law, but to make sure that there are issues being addressed to enable them, and at the same time ensure that they are doing everything in the best interest of Canadians. And CIRA, which is the National Intelligence and Security Review Agency, their mandate is much more focused on making sure all those national security and intelligence organizations actually follow the law and are compliant with all aspects of the law. So that's where our two mandates somewhat differ, even though there's a bit of overlap at times.
And you know what this really is it's a bit arcane, but it is part of the checks and balances in our electoral system. We all think of what Elections Canada does or Elections Ontario does provincially, but what Elections Canada does is ensure the integrity of the voting, of the ballot system and the election. But what your work does is to give us some of the backstory, the background. Who are the influencers? What is the influence that is being put on the Canadian system and Canadian electors? It's a dare I say, it's a much more broad understanding than we've had before.
Yeah, well, on the foreign interference thing, absolutely, and the impact that had or has on our democratic institutions and processes. But again, the other report that we dealt with was lawful intercept, which, as I said, the most recent one, or that we just finished. But that actually speaks about the tools and capabilities that our law enforcement have to actually protect Canadians, and making sure they're doing that at the same time balancing privacy rights and our charter rights of Canadian citizens. Report we did a couple years ago was on the federal mandate of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right? So there's different aspects that we look at that covers everything. And as I said, hopefully I'll have the privilege to be back on it, but ultimately that's not my decision. I just indicate my preference.
Well, it's valuable work, perhaps a bit unsung, but it's valuable work. I want to assure you. Let's see. Well, let's go over to the election, because you won with quite a remarkable 52% of the ballot of the ballots cast went to you, which is that's kind of a feather in your cap.
Look, again, humbled so much to have that incredible support of the constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. I believe I got over 6,600 more votes than I did in the last election, to go up by 3% again. It's humbling, and I couldn't do it with the incredible support of the volunteers, the campaign team that I had that was out there, and ultimately the incredible work that they do to get the message out there. I think it resonates. We had a great platform, I believe, this election that resonated with Canadians, but in particular youth and the working class across Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound and Canada. And ultimately, to be humbled with over 50% of the vote is exactly that. I've been increasing by 3% each election. I don't know if 100% is ever achievable, but that would, at my current rate, would require 16 more elections, and I don't think I can do 16 more elections, David. But we'll see how it plays out. I'll share right now that I have full intentions of running whenever the next federal election does occur. So I will continue to do my best to, again, garner that confidence of the voters in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, because but it means I just got to work that much harder over the next over this parliament and before the next federal election.
Well, on that note, Alex, we're going to take a quick break and come back, because hey, every time you say something, because something bubbles up in my brain. So we're going to keep talking. Friends, I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details. This is Rogers TV.
We invite you to play What's My Line?
Welcome, Mrs. Baker. Those folks over there need to guess your extraordinary occupation.
Are you an entertainer, Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Do people come to watch you, perform?
Yes.
Do you travel for work?
Yes, I do.
Do you ever wear a special type of costume?
Yes.
Is your job, physical?
Yes, indeed.
Are you a member of a team?
Yes.
Are you a professional baseball player?
Yes, I am.
Created during the Second World War, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League included 68 Canadians. One of its brightest stars was my mother, Saskatchewan's Mary Bonnie Baker, a pioneer for women in sports.
You're watching an interesting local show on Rogers TV and you want to know more. That's when you head to rogerstv.com. Our website provides more information about our programs, our hosts, our schedule, and about how you too can get involved with Rogers TV. Visit us online at rogerstv.com.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest is the MP-elect, because I got that right, the MP-elect for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, Alex Ruff. Alex, now we were talking about the election campaign. One of the things that was most interesting is that for us here at Rogers, because we had to cover Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, Huron-Bruce, and some of the other peripheral ridings, Simcoe Grey as well. Things were slow coming in, and we were just kind of, we were playing up the what was happening in the Maritimes and who was coming on, and who was in the early lead with one poll. It's a little ridiculous, but hey, that's election night. We're used to it. But when it did come, it came fairly fast.
No, once the results started coming in, and I mean, obviously they, I think, called the federal results even before I was comfortable, saying where I stood here locally. But ultimately, as we talked earlier, it worked out in my favor, and so it's always an interesting evening. And it is what it is, right? The voters, as they say, the voters are always right.
Mm-hmm. And you said that, you put us on notice you're going to run again. And
absolutely.
So that means, you have rather famously said that you are running for the next election the moment you have won the previous election. So I guess that's what you're doing, is whatever you're going to do, you're going to run for the next election.
Yeah, well, look, your job's to represent the constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound once you have the privilege of being elected, and that means you gotta work for them, and that's who I work for. And so ultimately, it means being responsive as much to your ability to get back to people when they reach out, help them with their issues with the federal bureaucracy, make sure you understand those key issues that matter to them, and then make sure when the governing party, in this case, it's the Liberals again, that ultimately any legislation that they bring forward is the best legislation possible for all Canadians, and including those constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, and make sure that I can be their voice in Ottawa, and I'm dedicated to that. So yeah, there's an element of that means you're basically trying to demonstrate to the voters that you are the best person to do the job locally, because ultimately voters only ever get to vote for their local representative. That's the way our Westminster system works. So I do my best to try to continue to earn that privilege and earn that right to be their representative.
Note to my producer, if I'm still around doing Politically Speaking at the next federal election, let's book Alex right now. Okay. Thank you, Mark. So So you're booked in for, for Rogers. Okay, Alex.
Well, we can't take anything for granted, David. I will do my best to re-earn that right after the next election, but obviously we're just in the early days of this parliament.
Now, just to be sure, or to be clear, in the Conservative Party, you do have if you're an incumbent and you have won, you do have the first right to say you will run again. Is that correct?
No, that all depends. Minority, what we have to do is normally the party will set conditions upon for if anybody wants to challenge me as the candidate. There's a process to do that. In a minority situation, we have had policies in place that have varied over the last 6 years, depending year to year on, if you want to be sort of to cement your position as the candidate of record and the incumbent. If you raise enough money locally and you do enough sort of things that is considered sufficient. If you to sort of protect your right. However, our Constitution allows for certain rules around challengers, right? So I'm sure if somebody wants to challenge me locally to be the Conservative candidate, there is a process that the party will establish for them to do that. And ultimately that's democracy in action.
So there is the potential for a contested nomination, as it's called, if those rules are followed.
Yeah, if the party establishes specific rules or I fail to meet the requirements to keep myself protected, it all depends. But that gets, as I said, it basically gets decided by the party year after year, and there's a process that anybody that would want to challenge me. And look, I'm not too worried if somebody chooses to challenge me. I will, do my best to make sure I earn that continued trust of not only through the election process, but through a nomination process again, which I was successful over 6 years ago now. Hard to believe.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to believe because I remember the first time I really met you was in we had an extended conversation in the parking lot at the old Rogers studio. So yeah, that was a 6 year. Time is flying. Time is flying. But let's shift a little bit from local. Oh, before I leave local, I did want to say to you, you must have a very, very devoted and probably very tired campaign team, because I know that there is overlap between the provincial and the federal party organizations. They're separate, obviously, but
a lot of the volunteers do.
Volunteers are the same, and they must have been really tested with 2 elections almost back to back.
Yeah, the ones that helped out both Mr. Vickers and myself, I believe they needed a bit of a break. So as I said, I'm sure I couldn't be here. I wouldn't be in the position I am as the MP-elect without their incredible devotion and hard work. So I owe a huge gratitude to all of them. And we're trying to pick a date here. We can actually hold a bit of a volunteer get together so I can thank them, in person, because even on election night, they all can't show up because a lot of them are volunteering. The last task that they volunteer is to scrutineer and be at the polling stations right across the riding. And our riding's not like Toronto Center where you can be walk across it in 10 minutes. There's people coming from Tobermory or Singhampton or Dundalk or wherever they may be. They can't make it to Owen Sound by the time 11 o'clock at night. They're not that interested in making the trip up to the sort of the final hoorah on election night. So it's something I will be trying to organize here in the coming weeks so that we can get everybody together and I can thank them in person.
And I should point out too that one of the privileges of this country is that we have the freedom to work for whomever we wish. It doesn't matter whether you're a Liberal or a Conservative or a Green or an NDP or one of the other smaller parties. We all have the right to work on behalf of those candidates. And I know there's always work to be done.
Look, as I said, there's a ton of work to be done in order to be successful, and kudos to all the all the candidates that ran, it's a huge commitment and sacrifice to put your name on the ballot. And so I thank them on election night and congratulated them on putting their name forward and partaking. But it goes bigger than just the candidates. It goes to all the volunteers and Canadians that partake in the democratic process. And for those that vote, I think we broke the national average again here in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. We did the last election. We were over 70% this time of voter turnout. So I will continue to encourage more and more voters in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound to show up at the polls because, as we've talked about before, I believe in democracy. I've been in countries around the world where citizens don't have the privilege of actually partaking in a free and transparent election process. And I'm just a big believer in them. Everybody getting out to vote. So again, huge thank you to all the voters that over 70% of the eligible voters voted in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound this federal election.
And let's not forget our people who work for Elections Canada as well. They can't partake in any partisan political action, but they're an important part of our democratic process because, hey, somebody's got to count the ballots.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got to have somebody in there counting them, and at the same time, just making sure the process is being done in a fair and democratic manner.
Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to touch on, speaking of the election, I wanted to touch on one of the surprises that happened, and that was Mr. Poilievre lost his seat in Carleton. And that was kind of predicted, but it wasn't predicted. But at the end of the day, it was the Liberal candidate was able to beat Mr. Poilievre, and he's now running in a riding in Alberta.
Well, he's not running.
No, he's not running yet because they got to wait for how the MP elect has to resign, and then.
and yeah, so that's Damien Currick from Battle River Crowfoot, who's indicated that he is intending to step down, but he can't step down until 30 days after the writs have been returned from Elections Canada to the House of Commons, and they haven't been returned yet. They must be returned before the 19th of May. And then once that's returned, he can't resign for 30 days. And then once he resigns, the Prime Minister has, I believe, 11 to 180 days to call a by-election. Mr. Carney has indicated publicly that should this occur, that he will trigger a by-election pretty much immediately. So yes, you're correct there. If Mr. Poilievre wants to get back into the House of Commons, he does have to get elected in a seat somewhere in Canada. And so it looks like it's going to be in Battle River Crowfoot. And kudos to Mr. Currick. Damien got elected the same time I did in 2019. So for him to take that step away, but he's dealing with a lot of family stuff as well. His father passed away just last year at the age of 53, I think. So it runs a big family farm out there. So ultimately, I know Damien's not going far. His intention, and he signaled, and Mr. Poilievre signaled that Mr. Currick will run again in the next federal election. But for the interim, this allows a path for Mr. Poilievre to get back into the House of Commons and to fill that role in the House and in the chamber. Because he still is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
And lest we think that this is unusual, it's not. But in Canadian governance history, it's not unusual for a member to give up their seat in order that someone else might run. And
100%. There's been leaders of both political, or I think more than just both major parties or three major parties. I believe it's occurred in a number of locations over, not that infrequently. And I think you've even had cases where the Prime Minister, no different than Mr. Carney was. He was the Prime Minister, yet didn't have a seat in the House of Commons until the election was called, which was called in fairly short order. But I believe actually Sir John A. Macdonald, during one of his tenures in the early days after Confederation, was not actually a sitting MP at one point, even though he was the Prime Minister. And I know other leaders, I think Diefenbaker, when he got elected as the leader of the Conservative Party. He wasn't a sitting MP at the time, so he had to get elected, so there's things change every time where somebody sometimes normally will step down, and not normally this close to a federal election, not normally because somebody's lost necessarily, but it has happened.
Well, the one I'm remembering is Lester Pearson. He had the very similar situation. He had left the diplomatic field where he had already won the Nobel Prize, moved into politics, and someone stepped down from what they called a safe Liberal seat in Northern Ontario, and he ran and was elected. So it's not an unusual, nor is it it's a democratic process. I want to be very clear on that. It's nothing suspicious here. It's happened before. It'll happen again.
No, you're right there.
Now the other thing is that the probability of Mr. Poilievre being reelected is pretty certain, because that is been described in some of the reading I've done as the safest Conservative seat in Canada.
I don't think it's the safest, but second safest, I think. But it is definitely one of the safest Conservative seats. And again, fascinating enough, historically, if you look at it, it'll be interesting to see if the other parties even run candidates. Sometimes in these types of by-elections, the other parties won't even run candidates sometimes, just because they recognize, no different to give Mr. Carney kudos, that I think in his public statement, made the point that it's for democracy to function properly, the leader of the official loyal opposition should be in the House in order to do their job of holding the government to account.
And that doesn't also prevent private citizens from deciding to run. They may not be endorsed by one of the major parties, but there's no reason why someone can't run as an independent in any election, as we've seen here in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
No, 100%. And in fact, maybe that longest vote ballot folks that did partake in particular in the riding in Carleton. I think there was over 90 people on the ballot. There's rumors that they may try to do that again actually in Battle River Crowfoot too, which I somewhat find fascinating, because it's not like it's an election pitch made by the Conservatives to change our first past the post thing. I thought it was a historical promise made by the former prime minister in the 2015 election. So ultimately, I would think it would be more advantageous for them to try to make that point crystal clear in, maybe in this last election, and Mr. Carney's riding in Nepean would have made more sense than trying to do it in Mr. Poilievre's former riding in Carleton. But you're 100% correct. Anybody can put their name forward. They just got to gather 100 signatures from constituents in that riding to put their name forward and get on the ballot. So it'll be interesting to see if they can scrounge that up in Battle River Crowfoot, if they want to try that again, or whether or not it's going to be a relatively uncontested election. I have no idea, but I know Mr. Poilievre won't take it for granted. It was one of the challenges he had as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. His job was to become campaigning right across the country, and whereas the Liberal, Mr. Fanjoy, I believe is his name, that got elected, had been knocking on doors for a year and a half, whereas Mr. Poilievre's been the leader for the last 2.5 years. He was out basically doing that across the country and had to accept that risk locally, and unfortunately it kind of bit him. Whereas this time around, obviously he'll be very much focused just on Battle River Crowfoot whenever that election gets called in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and he will probably, I suspect, be in the House sometime in the fall.
If the by-election gets called, as Mr. Carney has indicated he's willing to, then it should see Mr. Poilievre back in the House of Commons come September.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, Canadian politics are always exciting, always interesting, always something going on.
No, absolutely. And being another minority parliament, it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out.
Well, that's one of the other interesting things is that there are at least 4 judicial recounts going on. And there is some suggestion that the Liberals may be 1 seat shy of a minority if those judicial recounts play out, but we don't know. So it won't be less than what we got, but it might be more.
Could be, or it could go the other way. You never know, right? I believe in all sort of the one sort of is done now, but it's fascinating that the Liberal member there is ahead by 1 vote, but there has been some media reporting that one of the a publicly declared Bloc supporter had mailed her ballot in using the Elections Canada return mailing address, and then it was rejected because there was something wrong with the postal code. So a judge will ultimately, if that gets challenged, will make a judicial decision on whether or not to annul the results in that riding and call a by-election, which could see that riding go back to the polls as well. And with the other 3, the Liberals have won 2 of them and the Conservatives won the other one by, fairly close margins. So you're right. If all 3 go, the 2 that are already in favor of the Liberals stay that way, and the other one flips, it would get them potentially to 171. However, they could end up flipping the other way as well, and they could be back down to 168-ish. And if that other one comes down, they could be back down to 167. So again, with the NDP at only 7 elected members. You take the speaker out of the equation if the Liberals end up getting appointing or not appointing. If the speaker gets elected from the Liberal Party, that takes another vote away. So it actually makes the math very, very interesting. I'm sure there'll be pressure on, especially any confidence votes, which we have anything to do with money is a confidence vote. There is normally additional pressure, obviously, to make sure everybody that's available is in attendance, but it means it's even that much more important when literally things could be decided by 1 or 2 ballots, unlike sort of in the past where due to that supply and confidence agreement that the NDP signed with the Liberals in the last parliament, gave them actually a fair bit of extra seats, that more than enough to cover it. Here, they almost need every single one of them within a few. So it'll be fascinating to see how things play out in the coming weeks and months. It means you never know. People have failed to show up at a specific vote. It could mean we'd be back at the doors sooner than people predict.
But that's half of the fun, isn't it? I mean, the mathematics are and the permutations and combinations can be quite remarkable when you sit down and think, well, what if, and and sometimes the truth is stranger than any kind of potential we might see. I mean, who would have thought that the trigger for all of these events was the former prime minister resigning?
But I think a lot of us saw that coming, that it was likely, just a matter of time. But you're right. Ultimately, it's hard to predict exactly when things will occur or when things don't occur, especially in a minority situation. And we do have sort of fixed election laws federally now that Mr. Harper brought in when he was prime minister. So ultimately, if there is a majority, then with relative certainty, it will go the full 4 years. However, in reality, a minority government, the lifespan on average is only about 12 to 18 months. So this last parliament was actually a big time anomaly, mainly due to that supply and confidence agreement that the NDP signed. I don't think they're going to make that same error again in that, history would have told them that what ended up happening likely was going to happen, but they did it anyway. And ultimately, it didn't pan out too well for the NDP, on the national side.
Exactly, and I think that was the surprise that Mr. Singh then of course resigned, as probably that could be expected. But that was I think that was the surprise, the vote that the NDP did so poorly in so many places, and even the Bloc lost quite a number of seats to the Liberals as well.
Well, the Bloc lost a lot to us too, the Conservatives, and the NDP actually lost just as many to us as they did to the Liberals. Mm-hmm. We were very successful in getting our message out there of hope and unity and the future economic growth of this country to the working class and to the youth. So I think ultimately it was a bit of a split there. We did switch a lot of NDP ridings, traditional NDP ridings, but they took a hit from both sides, and from at least incumbent NDP MPs did, and the Bloc did lose a number as well. I think they lost about 7 or 8. And so therefore it made an interest. We did, grow substantially in 20 plus seats that we grew, 24 seats, I actually think, that we grew by in our party. So some great growth, but we did, things didn't go our way either ultimately on the national stage, and we lost some great MPs that ultimately, means there's always things to improve upon, and hopefully that'll the party and the leader will take those into consideration, and we'll come back and we'll get across that finish line next time, because that's ultimately the way this works. But in the meantime, I know I'll continue to do my best to make sure any legislation that the government brings forward is the best legislation possible for all Canadians, and in particular those rural Canadians in our riding of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Yes, because the point has been made by several commentators that rural Ontario went blue, that the Liberals won most of the urban ridings, and you can see that on any of the maps, but rural ridings went blue.
Well, it wasn't just rural. We switched a lot of those towns or cities like London and Windsor and Kitchener. Obviously, we didn't sweep them completely. Actually, I think we did sweep Windsor, well, depending on the recount here. But we had a lot of success in convincing, as I said, the working class Canadians there across Ontario in particular. So that's where we did see a lot of growth. But ultimately, we'll see how it plays out.
It makes life interesting for you, because, as you said, you keep your local people and their local concerns first and foremost. But in the big strategic picture, which is for the tall foreheads, not for you, not for me, there's always something to be thought about, always something coming down the pipeline, isn't there?
Always. Well,
believe it or not, Alex, we have run out of time, and I want to thank you for being with us today. I know it's been a very busy day for you. Your meeting ran over time, but we appreciate your being with us, and so best wishes. And if we don't talk to you before the summer, our paths may cross over the summer, but we'll see you in the fall for sure.
Sounds good, David. And just for the listeners or viewers out there, is obviously I'll be running my annual summer constituency MP barbecue again down in the Chesley area. I believe that'll be July, just looking at a calendar here, I think July 27th. Sunday, July 27th is the date that we've, I think, sort of tentatively programmed, but watch out for your mailboxes. I'll be getting a constituency mailer out there. And I still have 5 recipients for the King's Coronation Medal that will be recognized here in the coming weeks. So I'm hoping to get that done before Canada Day. We'll see, just to try to get those final 5 people. So there's still incredible work being done by everybody across the riding. My final comment, congratulations to the Hanover Barons for winning their
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
With Rogers TV, you can cheer on the home team from the comfort of your living room. We'll head to the rink, the field, the court, or the pitch, so you don't have to. Tune in and cheer on your local amateur athletes on Rogers TV.
With clubs, leagues, and courts in every province